Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Tennessee's big win over Alabama as well as Miami winning an absolute shootout in Louisville, Kentucky. A huge win for them and keeps both those teams in the CFP and in their conference hunt, which will be very interesting to watch going forward. And we'll start with that conference that Tennessee's in, and it's getting a little bit more cleared out, but also a little bit murkier. It's very hard to get a beat on the SEC right about now. But LSU's making statements. I can tell you that with absolute confidence. This is a team that it would have been very easy to lose this game. This is one of those moments, right? You have an emotional, crazy overtime win over Ole Miss in a game where they were circling it from January. I can absolutely promise you that. They very badly knew that they needed to win that game if they wanted any shot at the CFP. And then you go up the road and you play a really good team up there in Fayetteville that had beaten Tennessee earlier in the year, had caused problems for just about anyone, has a player in Taylon Green that can cause all types of issues defensively, and they handle business like it was nothing. It was absolutely incredible to watch this team, and not enough can be said about what Blake Baker and this entire defensive staff has done for this team, because the reality is it's just absolute domination. They're all over the place. They're playing really, really strong football, playing exactly where they need to play, which is 90% of the battle, just being where you need to be. Everyone is playing their job, and Zaya Alexander is playing incredible coverage on the back end. There was a hit from Sage Ryan that made me feel like we got LSU back just a little bit in this game, although it was flagged for some crazy reason. At the end of the day, this is an LSU team that's going to fly around. They're going to play better defense, and it's kind of weird saying that, even a couple weeks removed from that USC game. It's weird to say that, but a couple of keys to victory here. Whit Weeks is an absolute star. He's becoming one of my favorite players in all of college football, and it's not just because of the cornrows, but at the end of the day, a very, very talented player. 9 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, and an INT that was followed by the best celebration I've ever seen in my entire life. But the dude is awesome. He's all over the place. He's everything that this team needs to be, especially in the middle of that defense. You need a guy that plays a little bit like a psychopath, and this is exactly what he does. I absolutely love Whit Weeks, and he's one of those guys that is really kind of the personification of what Blake Baker wants to do on defense, just outright aggression from start to finish. And then overall, the defensive confidence is totally different. There's no players out there that look like they're guessing anymore. There's no players that feel like they're out of their shoes or they feel like they're chasing or anything like that. Everyone's where they need to be. They're doing their job and they're executing at a ridiculously high level. And then Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier was not spectacular in this game. 23 for 34, 233, and no touchdowns, no interceptions. The kid just plays really good football. Frankly, you look around the SEC, Diego Pavia, I don't want to give any disrespect to him, but there are very few quarterbacks playing as good of football as Garrett Nussmeier is right now. He's making every single play, and frankly, as I look around the country and I'm trying to figure out who my favorite for the number 1 quarterback off the board in the draft is, this guy's climbing the boards very, very quickly. At least in my mind. I'm not sure what the NFL scouts are thinking right about now. But huge win for LSU. They keep rolling on. They're one of those teams that they feel like they're finding something. I said it last week. I redid my picks, and I have LSU in my SEC title game. I did have Texas as well, so went kind of 2 opposite directions. But at the end of the day, this LSU team is finding something, and I think they're going to be a problem going forward. This was a drubbing. This was an absolute domination from pretty much start to finish. This Indiana team is absolutely for real. Curt Cignetti has done remarkable things. And it's not just, the personnel changes, because that's a huge part of it. Obviously, Curtis Rourke has played great football. Elijah Surratt is an absolute problem on the outside. They have 2 running backs that are just incredible from start to finish in this game. But the energy around this team is different. They walked into this game knowing that they were the better team, knowing that if they went about their business the way that they always have, they were going to win. And frankly, Curtis Rourke even went down with an injury, and Taven Jackson came in and totally dominated. It looks like he is going to get the start against Washington, so definitely something that you badly needed to see. And more than anything, I think the biggest thing here was you got Nebraska reaching early. And Nebraska is not a team that can play from behind very often because they want to run the ball. If they can't run the ball, they're not going to be able to be successful. I know for a fact that when they were writing up the game plan for a win here, Dylan Raiola throwing 44 passes was not on it. I can absolutely promise you that. They just had no running room, and that was the reality of the situation. And that goes to the next thing. Line of scrimmage domination was absolutely for real. Nebraska ran for 70 yards on 29 carries. Pressure on Raiola was pretty consistent throughout the game, and then 280 yards rushing and only 1 sack allowed on the other side. So that's where you win Big Ten games, and man, did Indiana win that battle on Saturday. And then not missing a beat. This is a huge thing for this team going forward. Obviously, this is going to be the guy that makes the start against Washington this upcoming weekend. So Curtis Rourke leaves this game right nearing halftime, but really halftime is when the change was made, and Taven Jackson comes in 7 for 8, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns, just executed the offense and did a really, really good job doing it, and frankly, badly needed the confidence booster heading into a game where you're going to play a really solid Washington defense, although they got exposed by Iowa a couple of weeks ago. This is still a very solid unit, and he badly needed that one to just get his mind right, feel confident going into the next one. So huge win for Indiana. They keep rolling forward, and they're one of those teams that they keep piling wins, and at some point they're going to meet up with Ohio State, and you turn it on for one weekend, this entire sport turns on its head very, very quickly. But we'll get there when we get there. No two ways about that. Another team that I was really impressed by was Kansas State. This was a game that, kind of like a couple of the other ones we just talked about, they could have fallen into this trap pretty comfortably. Kansas State was coming off a couple of big-time wins. West Virginia coming off a loss to Iowa State that they badly wanted. It felt like a game that could have been a little bit sketchy. Kansas State handled business. And the first half was a lot different than the second half. So props to West Virginia for sticking around. But when Kansas State needed to, they absolutely turned it on. And another team, kind of like LSU in the SEC, I think Kansas State's finding themselves, both offensively and defensively. And I think they're one of those teams that I don't know if anyone in the Big 12 wants to see right about now. But how Kansas State was able to get this win, Avery Johnson is starting to kind of sling the rock around, which is not necessarily the way that I thought Kansas State was going to be able to win games. That's exactly how they won this one. He went 19 for 29, 298, 3 touchdowns in this game, and I believe no INTs if I'm not mistaken. Remarkable stuff from a guy that 2 weeks ago you wouldn't have trusted to throw a pass over 10 yards. Just the reality of where he was at, but he's been able to bounce back in a huge way, and this team really, really is in a great spot going forward if that's the performance they're getting every week. And then a strong third quarter can change everything. Everyone knows coming out of that halftime, whoever responds the best is usually going to be the team that wins. Well, Kansas State was held only had a 7-point lead at halftime, and then in the third they scored 21 very, very quickly, and then scored right again in the fourth quarter to take the lead to 28. So they pretty much buried them very quickly in the second half, and then the Mountaineers had no running room, which is another thing we've talked about with West Virginia over the last couple of weeks. They pretty much have to get over 200, 250 yards if they're going to win a game, because passing the ball, they're not going to be effective. That's just the reality. They had 3.5 yards per carry, only 152 yards on the ground. Was never going to be enough against this Kansas State team, and frankly, isn't going to be enough the rest of the season. So if you want to find out what West Virginia did on a weekend, just look at how many rushing yards they had. If it's under 150 or right around there, they probably lost. If it's over 200, then maybe they won that game. But overall, really, really good stuff from Kansas State. I think it's one of those teams that just continues to find their stride. Obviously, BYU, Iowa State to go through, and they have Iowa State at the end of the season, which will be very interesting to watch. But a really, really good team that feels like they're starting to come into what we expected them to be at the beginning of the season. And then finally, a gross game. No two ways about that. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't know if people agree with me or not. I love these Illinois jerseys. I thought they were so cool from start to finish. The helmets are as cool as I've ever seen them. I know people don't love the jerseys. I'm into them. I don't know what it is. I absolutely love them. Maybe it was just because they got the win, to be totally honest with you. But a massive win on a massive day for Illinois. The Red Grange Unis home fan base was going absolutely crazy, and you got a huge win. No two ways about that. This was one of those games that a lot of people, including myself, frankly, pegged as a Michigan win because I really felt like Jack Tuttle was going to make a difference in this offense, and he did not. It was not very pretty for them passing the ball by any means. He did have a pick in this game. I don't think he might have gotten over 100 yards passing, but it wasn't pretty getting there. But at the end of the day, really, really good stuff. I think for Michigan, you are who you are at this point. At the offseason, find a new quarterback, find a number of different offensive linemen, and see where you stand. But as of right now, it's going to get rough. I don't even know if they make a bowl game going this way, but we'll figure that out when we do. But a couple of keys to this game. I think the biggest thing is when you force Michigan to throw, you win the game. Plain, period, end of story. Michigan was only able to average 3 yards per carry in this game. Throwing the ball 32 times is not necessarily the path to victory for Michigan to win, but no runs over 20 yards as well. not going to win you the game. That's just the reality of Michigan, and Illinois did it to an absolute T. And then the defensive line for Illinois just dominated. This Michigan O-line is not nearly the Michigan O-line that we saw last year, and it really showed in this game. Gabe Jacas had 13 tackles, 2.5 sacks. He was all over the place. It was absolutely remarkable, and it was one of those games where when you see that defensive line go to work pretty much all day, you know exactly the way this game is going, regardless of what Illinois did on offense. And frankly, it wasn't a ton. This wasn't going all that great, and adaptation was the other part of this because this offense did not play very well. 80 passing yards did not necessarily seem like the plan going into this one, but they got it done. They did what they needed to do, did not play a pretty game offensively. When your defense holds a team to 7 points, you're going to win most of those games. So really good stuff from Illinois. I feel like they're starting to show people that they're playing just really good football. I don't think they're necessarily going to factor too much into the Big Ten race. I don't necessarily think they're going to be a team that's going to be an outright problem going forward. I do think they're a team that any team on any given day is going to have an issue with. And it's going to be really awesome to watch this team going forward. But another one of those teams that really just continues to play really good football, and frankly probably should be higher ranked in the AP poll right now, but that's an issue we can get into on another day. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we got to get into the top 25 results. There were a number of games, whether it was Iowa State coming back and preserving their undefeated season, Notre Dame kind of going down to Atlanta and getting a pretty good win, a win that was a little bit complicated, and I'll get into that right after this, so stick with us.